No light tonight, so you have to, I'm just here in the shadows. So there you go. Okay, I'm very happy to see such a good turnout for the films tonight because I have a sneaking suspicion that most of you not only haven't seen these films, but you've never actually even heard of these films. I only know of these films in the past year. I thank my good friend and colleague, Mr. Philippe Garnett, for introducing me to these two movies. He and I did a program of films in Paris last summer, and although Philippe granted me somewhat carte blanche to pick the films that I wanted to show in Paris, he demanded that these two films be included in the program, and I was unfamiliar with either of them. And so it was an introduction for me as well. So I'm happy to share these with you tonight. One of the things that we try to do in Noir City, as was very kindly pointed out by the stranger today, is that we have sometimes an elastic definition of noir, which I think serves us in good stead so that we can introduce unexpected films into the mix. It's not all private eyes and femme fatales and, you know, high contrast lighting in 1948. Because these two films that you're going to see tonight were both made in 1932, which certainly doesn't qualify as anybody's definition of the film noir era. But if you are unfamiliar with pre-code films, you are about to get a little dose of that wonderful period in American cinema. In 1934, Hollywood imposed upon itself a production code to sort of dictate the do's and don'ts of American cinema. This is what was allowed, this is not allowed in these films. The reason they did that is because, as I like to say, American films were growing up a little too fast for the comfort of some major social institutions in this country, like the Catholic Church primarily. And the Legion of Decency and various other entities that were sort of the moral watchdogs of the culture said, you know, this is happening a little too quickly. The films are so popular and the storytelling is so sophisticated and the themes are so intense for mass consumption that we need to kind of put the brakes on this. There were also, of course, Hollywood has always inspired the worst in human behavior. And there were a number of scandals that had happened in Hollywood. There was certainly a lifestyle lived by many of the filmmakers and the artists there that caught the popular imagination. The Fatty Arbuckle scandal, the William Desmond Taylor murder. These things sort of put a stain on Hollywood for the rest of America, and they decided, you know, the product that they're putting out, it must be part and parcel of this hedonistic lifestyle that the people are living out there. So let's impose a code of behavior upon the movies. Okay, that happened in 1934. And the reason that film noir sort of developed in the 1940s out of that is because filmmakers were sort of straining against this production code and they wanted to tell more adult stories. And the production code is a big reason for why film noir existed when it did. But tonight we're going to show you two examples of films made before the imposition of the production code. And I think it really is informative and kind of fascinating to see that many of the themes that people find synonymous with film noir, that there was sort of an institutionalized corruption in American society, that there was in many cases a direct connection between organized crime and politics. These were things that the production code sort of outlawed. And you're going to see an absolutely incredible example of this in these two films tonight. It actually is kind of jaw-dropping to think that these films were made in 1932 because the very same issues are being discussed and played out today. I mean, it is really kind of mind-boggling. There was a period after the crash, the stock market crash, where a lot of writers were examining what is it that led to that. You know, what was happening in the sort of rampant capitalism of the time that led to this distrust of the system, right? And in the early 1930s, there was this very interesting subgenre of films that I can't really call them vigilante films, but they were certainly films about individuals in positions of influence in the country having to take the initiative to correct the inherent wrongs in the system. And that's what you're going to see in the movie that we're about to show, OK America. The character of Larry Wallace in this film, the radio announcer, is clearly based on Walter Winchell, who was, you know, the most influential media star of the time. He is played by Lou Ayers, who, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Lou Ayers, but a very, very interesting actor, had a long, long career, became a major star in All Quiet on the Western Front in 1930, which was a major, major anti-war film, still probably one of the greatest anti-war films ever. And that was kind of Lou Ayers' story as well. He was a very, very well-known pacifist, and when World War II came around, he was a conscientious objector to the war because he said, I will only serve in the capacity of a medical. He actually went to medical school before he became an actor. And he said, I will only heal people, I won't harm them, and I won't serve otherwise. And it actually, Lou Ayers led to the military actually accepting conscientious objector status because he was so popular that it was really bad publicity when they said, no, you will serve in the capacity that we dictate. And he said, no, I won't be put in a position where I have to kill another person. I will only heal that person. It was pretty amazing for the time. And Lou Ayers was actually going to play Dr. Kildare on television, if you remember that character. And this is pretty remarkable to think of. It was 1959, and they offered him the role of Dr. Kildare, and he said, I will not smoke on television, because there was a cigarette sponsor for the show. And he said, I will not smoke on television because smoking causes cancer, and I don't want to harm people through my example. And they gave the role to Richard Chamberlain instead. And it kind of made his career. So Lou Ayers was a pretty remarkable person. And in this film, you will see him play a very thinly veiled version of Walter Winchell. This film was written by a man named William Anthony McGuire. I don't know where he got this, other than he was clearly, I mean, he was a Broadway impresario. And his biggest claim to fame is that he would eventually write the screenplay for The Great Ziegfeld, which won the Oscar for Best Picture in 1940. And that was the year that McGuire died. And I think it was just his interest in the incredible power that Walter Winchell wielded that led him to write this screenplay, because there's nothing else like it in his credit list, in his filmography, or any of the stage work that he did. Excuse me. The film is directed by Tay Garnett, who was a very, very successful director. He has absolutely no noir credentials other than probably the most famous film noir movie ever made, which is The Postman Always Rings Twice in 1946 with John Garfield and Lana Turner. And I never really thought much of Tay Garnett as a director. He made most of his great films in the 1930s. By the time my personal obsession with the 40s came around, he wasn't a very inventive or creative director. This movie was a revelation to me. I just found it to be a beautifully directed film, and he's obviously very youthful and just full of vim and vigor in the way he makes this film. So it's a very unique movie, you will see. I mean, for 1932 to have a film in which the relationship between criminals and politicians is so directly described, and the fact that this plot leads all the way to the White House in this movie is absolutely incredible. So, and I hope you stick around for the second film tonight, Afraid to Talk. But here's the deal. Through some weird fluke of programming, we have like an hour and 15-minute intermission between the two movies. So here's the deal. I'm going to be at 10 Mercer over there drinking during intermission. I say we completely scare the hell out of that bartender by like storming the place during intermission. So if you want to go hang out, have a cocktail, I'll be happy to have you buy me a cocktail. I say we all go to 10 Mercer during the movies and then come back. Because you can't, this is the rule of show business, right? If you print the time, you have to stick to that time. You can't go any earlier. So they printed it at 9:30. We got a show at 9:30 because there's somebody probably driving from Renton to see that movie at 9:30, right? So we can't start any earlier, but we can't drink. So I invite you to join me at 10 Mercer during the intermission, and we'll talk about movies and such. Okay. Thank you very much for coming out to see these two movies. This is a little bit of a gamble, programming stuff from 1932 at a film noir festival, but I really think you're going to enjoy OK America. Okay, we'll see. Thanks.